President Donald Trump won the New Hampshire primary last night, but former South Carolina governor and ambassador Nikki Haley, she says this fight is not over.
Yeah, and really marking that she's planning to stay in the race. And just settling up north now, all eyes, of course, are turning here to the Palmetto State, South Carolina, ahead of our first in the nation primary, which would be on February the 3rd.
As promised, joining us back live in the studio tonight, two of the top political analysts to talk about the presidential race, presidential politics, Joel Sawyer and Antoine C. Wright. Delighted to have both of you back.
Thank you.
We talked on Monday about what Nikki would have to do in order to carve out a path forward. In your estimation, did she do it?
You know, she's not out yet, but I mean, I think I said on Monday she had a very, very narrow path, and she's kind of down to a tightrope at this point, right? A small double-digit loss in New Hampshire is not what, you know, it's better than what we thought going into the start of the week, but it's still not great. It's still a loss. So in South Carolina, look, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be some polling out very, very soon that polls South Carolina as a two-person race. Whatever that number is, she's got to start making progress, and she's got to make substantial progress. And I don't know that she necessarily has to win the state, even though she's from here, but she needs to show that she can move the needle.
I'm going to talk about President Joe Biden. What was interesting about him winning the primary, Antoine, was that he was a write-in candidate, which there were some issues and disputes before his name got on the ballot.
Well, thankfully, Joe Biden had the courage and the steel spine to make certain that black voters' voices are heard first in the democratic process by making South Carolina first in the nation. Why? 60% of people who cast their vote in our primary are African American. I think when you look at who's been the backbone of this Democratic Party, it's been black voters. So rightly so, over 40% of enslaved Africans came through this country, came through the port of Charleston. Rightly so, we start this process in South Carolina, and I commend the president for doing what is necessary to make the recommendation and the DNC following through to make that happen.
Listen, the First Lady is going to be in South Carolina later this week. The president is coming as well. Even the California governor is in town today campaigning for Biden. I mean, it almost feels like a battleground for Democrats, but it's not. What's the strategy?
The road to heaven and the White House runs through South Carolina. and that's not new to anyone. But truth be told, I think this means that, one, they're not taking any constituency for granted, in particular black voters, but certainly not taking the Palmetto State. What people may not know about Joe Biden's relationship with South Carolina, forget about Jim Clyburn for a second, although they are tightly joined at the hip. When Joe Biden was going through one of the toughest times in his life, grieving from his son's death, he grieved here in South Carolina in Charleston. 2 weeks after 9 people were killed in a church in Charleston, when the cameras went away and the scene was no longer the national scene, he and his wife were there in Mother Emanuel worshiping with those people. True to his God, true to his native land, true son of South Carolina, honorary son of South Carolina.
Let's talk about the support for former Governor Nikki Haley. We know that 5 out of 6 senators are now endorsing Donald Trump, people that she helped put on for their political campaigns, including Senator Tim Scott, also endorsing Donald Trump as well. Matter of fact, Donald Trump brought that up last night in New Hampshire. Let's take a listen.
Think of it, appointed, and you're the senator of his state, and she endorsed me. You must really hate her. No, it's a shame. It's a shame. Uh-oh.
I just love you.
No, that's why he's a great politician.
Listen, he had to step up to that microphone quick, didn't he?
Really quick. Donald Trump was even caught off guard. What do you make of that? I mean, that was pretty interesting.
Look, I mean, the Republican Party, in terms of what the Republican Party cares about, it has really shifted. I mean, and if you think about the fact, you know, Nikki Haley has not run in a Republican primary in 14 years here. It's very different demographically. If you think about somebody who was 35 when Nikki Haley was last in a Republican primary, is 50 now. You know, add that to the demographic shift that Donald Trump has come along, and the party has really come to be defined by the personality of Donald Trump rather than the traditional, you know, various constituencies of the Republican Party of budget hawks, civil libertarianism, being strong on defense, the religious right. Those things are kind of second place to, well, what does Donald Trump think? And so, Nikki, and that's not unique to South Carolina, but Nikki Haley, I think, is in a very tough position, making the case to a constituency, to a Republican Party that very much likes Donald Trump.
Let me ask both of you the insights on this, because we were talking before we went on air, and we see it in the campaign ads that Nikki Haley has released here in South Carolina today, saying she's used to fighting against the establishment. And Antoine, you've talked about all of the men that she has beat in her political career. But now I'm hearing some resentment, Joel. I mean, the fact that the party clearly wants to unify. The party wants to focus on the general election, not these primaries, general, Super Tuesday and all of that. And they're looking at Nikki saying, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's always a little bit of a disconnect between party leadership and average voters. I mean, I think that there is a slice of the South Carolina electorate that wants to make their voice heard. Nikki Haley is hoping that is a fairly large slice, and once some of the polling comes out, I don't know that it is, but we'll find out in pretty short order.
But know this, we all remember, old enough to remember, Nikki Haley was one of the leaders in the Tea Party movement. They created this new surge or this new wave within the Republican Party and launched these extreme politicians that then took over the Republican Party. Fast forward the tape, the same extreme movement has gotten stronger, a little different. Baked in Trumpism is now taking over the party, and now she's getting swallowed in this new movement within the Republican Party. So what goes around comes around. I think what the chattering class and what folks like Haley have to understand is this is not your Republican Party that you ran in 2010. This is a new wave. There's no allegiance to establishment politicians. She's now considered the establishment. And what folks want is what Donald Trump has given them. And Donald Trump is responding to a very extreme electorate, whether people agree with me or not.
Well, really good breakdown. I did have one more question. I hear the producer is counting us down, so I'm going to try to squeeze it in really quick. Thanks, guys. What about women? If we heard that Senator Gates made the comment that, Donald Trump doesn't really need women voters, where before it was a different story. And Nikki Haley now trying to step in and pull some of those female voters. Any thoughts on that strategy?
Donald Trump definitely needs women voters in the general election. We're going to have a very strange general election where it's going to be difficult to change anyone's mind in terms of if they were previously Biden voters, they're not going to be Trump voters and vice versa. But you're definitely going to need women to show up for either Joe Biden or Donald Trump in order to win in November.
I'm not in the business of telling my mother or my sister or any woman in my life what their health care decision should be, or saying government should decide, especially not predominantly old white men who traditionally have run government in this country. And so I think that's one thing, but also every politician running on the Republican side have all agreed to a national abortion ban. Say what you want about the issue, it's been proven across the country, even in predominantly red states, that's not what women want, that's not what men want, and that's not what young voters want. At some point, you have to come to the realization of the math of politics. It's addition and multiplication, not subtraction or division. And so the governor on Face the Nation came out Sunday and said she is clearly for a national abortion ban. If she wants women to come in and participate, then she's going to have to figure out how to make some adjustments in her position.
Listen, appreciate the sharp insight and analysis. Check your calendars. Let's see if we can do this again on Monday after Nikki's been on the ground, Nikki Haley, and I'm not sure when Trump is headed into town, but let's just see what the lay of the land looks like. We'll like to have you guys back. We want to remind you all that early voting is already open for the Democratic primary, which is being held February 3rd. The Republican primary is about a month from now, but you still have another day to register. Tomorrow is the deadline to register if you're voting in the Republican primary, and all of that information is posted for you on WISTV.com.
We're going to take a quick break. Much more news and an update on that forecast after this.